Yep.
Great. So we're here for beneficial insects. Only the people's pictures that you can see are being recorded. The rest of you are blissfully anonymous. I just introduced Deborah, and we'll let Deborah start her presentation.
I'm going to have to ask you to read this, Darby, because some of it's
Yes,
covered.
no problem. I'll be your eyes and reading ears.
Thank you.
Vancouver Island Master Gardeners Association, VIMGA, is a chapter of the Master Gardeners Association of BC, a registered nonprofit society. We are part of an international organization of specially trained volunteer teachers and consultants who work in partnership with public sector agencies like the library and private enterprise to teach and promote science-based, sustainable horticultural knowledge and methods. These people are qualified, is what that says. This seminar is the property of Vancouver Island Regional Library and Vancouver Island Master Gardeners Association. It's intended for educational purposes only. You cannot sue us for a mishap with bark mulch, for example. Copying and/or commercial use of all or part of the seminar or its contents is prohibited without express written consent. It's science-based information, accurate to the best of VIMGA's knowledge, and it's at the sole discretion, responsibility, and liability of you, the user. And some of the images and info are from internet sources. They're labeled or cited. And thank you to the person or companies for their use in this nonprofit educational presentation.
Okay. Thank you, Darby. Okay. I'm here tonight to change your mind about bugs, specifically beneficial insects in the home garden, but also about a lot of other bugs as well. If you're like me, you grew up thinking that all bugs, with a few exceptions like butterflies and honeybees, were pests, and that the only good bug was a dead bug. Ladybugs were cute and we liked them, but we had no idea why. And even bees were bad if they got too close to people. So bugs were poisoned, squashed, swatted, or electrocuted willy-nilly because everyone knew they were either useless or dangerous or just a nuisance to be gotten rid of. The reality is that the vast majority of insects, which have 6 legs, along with the 8-legged arachnids like spiders and mites, are not pests. In fact, only about 0.1% of the 10 to 30 million species of insects are pests. That means just 1 out of every 1,000 species of insects is a pest that attacks humans and or their crops. Of the other 999, about 500 are neutral, neither pests nor beneficial as far as humans are concerned, but they are critical to the food web of the entire planet. And the other 499 are classified as beneficial. This means there are far more of the good guys out there attacking the bad guys that are attacking your plants. So tonight I'm here to talk about those bugs that are beneficials in your garden. There are other species of beneficials that I won't touch on, like those used to control mosquitoes or in commercial agriculture, because they aren't very useful in the home garden. First, let's define what we mean by beneficial insects. Insects, spiders, or mites that eat or parasitize pests are often called beneficials, natural enemies, or biological control agents. The other type of beneficial in your garden is one you're probably more familiar with, which is pollinators. I'm going to talk more about all 3 kinds of these in a bit. Most plant pests are attacked by beneficial insects that help to control or suppress the pest. It's like there is a mostly silent little war going on in your garden that you probably aren't aware of, but it is helping keep the pests there at a manageable level. Therefore, it will benefit your garden if you learn to recognize beneficial species and do everything you can to help them survive and thrive there. Manageable level, you ask? But I want there to be no pests in my garden. Given how critical insects are to life on Earth, I'm going to challenge you to rethink that position and begin to accept it is not necessary or possible or even desirable to eliminate all insect and mite pests in your garden. They will not cause noticeable harm if their numbers are kept in check by providing a food source for maintaining beneficials, which are in turn a food source for other animals such as bats and birds. It's all about balance. So let's start with an overview of the beneficials found in our part of the world. First are the predators. They capture and eat other bugs, and for many of these, it is only the larva or juvenile stage that is predatory. First, what we're going to talk about is ladybird beetles, sometimes called lady beetles, but it's something I've always known as a ladybug. Adults and larvae feed on aphids, whiteflies, scales, mealybugs, and other soft-bodied insects. There are many species that vary in size, color, and pattern. Colors are black, red, orange-red to almost yellow. Most species have colored spots or markings on their back. They are from 1 to 5 millimeters for adults and about 1 to 7.5 millimeters for the larvae. So the larvae are bigger. They overwinter as adults. Eggs are laid in clusters on the underside of leaves and branches. There's usually just one generation a year. Now you can see in these pictures, we have two different kinds of actual ladybugs in here, the two spot up in the upper left corner, and then the multicolored Asian, both adults. And then on the right side of the screen, we have pictures of the larva. And I still remember the first time I saw one of these, I thought it looked like a little cross between a dinosaur and a tank. They're the funniest looking little things, and they're kind of fuzzy, and they're bigger than a ladybug. So they're very strange. And then the eggs, you can always tell the eggs because they're in a cluster, and they're one of the few insect eggs I've seen that are yellow. Okay, the next one we're going to talk about is the aphid midge. Now, these are, a midge is a tiny little fly, and what they do is they attack aphids. The adults are tiny. They're like 3 millimeters, and they're delicate, long-legged brown flies that are active at night and thus rarely seen. So look at the picture in the upper right corner. Visualize that thing literally 3 millimeters and flying around at night. That's why you've never seen one, okay? They overwinter as pupae in the soil, and the eggs are laid in colonies of aphids, and there are several generations per year. Now, the way you know if you have these active in your garden is you look on the underside of leaves where you have aphids, and you look for these little orangey, darker colored little worm-like things that you can see in all three of these other pictures. That's the larvae, and they feed on the aphids. They just chow them right down. So the top picture shows the one larva, and then it has the empty skins of aphids that have had their innards kind of sucked out and eaten by the larva. And then at the bottom picture, you can see 2 or 3 of the little larvae that are kind of orangey colored. And then the picture in the middle of the screen shows a real close-up of one of these larvae feeding on a winged aphid. So the next one we're going to talk about is the syrphid fly, which we also call a hoverfly. And the adults resemble yellow jackets, which they're often mistaken for. They're 8 to 15 millimeters long, which is about like that. The mature larvae are about the same size. They are distinguished from bees by their eyes, which have a ski goggle appearance covering their entire face side to side. So if you look at that big picture in the middle, see the great big eyes that look like ski goggles that have been put over the eyes of this fly. The larvae, which is the picture in the lower left and the upper left, are flattened, legless maggots with no distinct head and a tapered body. Colors range from yellow to green to brown. The adults hover over flowers before landing to feed on nectar and pollen, their only food source. That's another thing that's different from bees. Bees generally don't hover before they land. They kind of fly around and zoom in. But these guys hover first, which is why they're called hoverflies. The eggs are small and white and are visible in aphid colonies. Now, the picture in the upper right, the arrow is pointing to one tiny little hoverfly egg, that little white egg, amongst all those red aphids. They overwinter as larvae, pupae, or adults, depending on the species. Eggs are laid on aphid-infested plant parts. Several generations per year happen depending on the species. They feed on aphids, scales, thrips, and other soft-bodied insects. This is just one of many types of flies that are important for pollination. So I challenge you guys out in your garden next time you think you see a bee, look closely and see if it isn't a hoverfly instead. Next, we have the lacewings. There are brown lacewings and green lacewings. The green lacewing larvae and the brown lacewing larvae and adults feed on aphids, spider mites, whiteflies, thrips, leafhoppers, scales, mealybugs, psyllids, small caterpillars, and insect eggs. They are out there doing a lot of work in your garden. They overwinter either as adults or pupae, and they're up to 4 generations a year. Now, this is the really fun part about lacewings. Their eggs are on long stalks on the underside of leaves and branches, and you can see in the 2 pictures marked eggs. The lacewing, I think what it does, I've read, it spins a little strand like a silk almost, and it positions the egg right in the end of that little strand. So they're dangling under leaves. And what this does is protects the eggs from predators that are crawling on the leaves because the eggs are dangling underneath. I think that's just a really clever evolutionary adaptation to save their eggs from predation. Let's see. The adults are about 1 to 2 centimeters, so they're pretty good sized. And the mature larvae are about half that. Okay, you can see the larvae there in the lower left. Notice that for all the insects that I'm showing you today, the larvae always look very different from the adult. They just look like a completely alien kind of critter. Okay, and then we have the mantids, praying mantis. The adults are 5 to 10 centimeters long and either green, brown, or yellow in color. All have an elongated thorax, that's the big, long part of the body, and grasping forelegs, which they use to hold their prey while they eat. They overwinter as eggs in egg cases, which are glued to wood, bark, or other plant material. There's 1 generation per year. They feed on many insect pests, including aphids, flies, beetles, but they also feed on beneficials, so they're not just feeding on pests. Now, I personally have never seen a praying mantis. I would love to, but I just have never seen one. And I hope that you all have a chance to see them. They can look pretty cool. Okay, now let's talk about the other predatory insects that you may not be aware of. First, we have the black beetles, also called a ground beetle, which is the photo in the top center here. They live in the soil and feed on soil-dwelling pests such as caterpillars, cutworms, and slugs. Many also feed on weed seeds. Now, I'm sure you have been working in the soil and disturbed a black beetle or a ground beetle that came kind of beetling out, if you will, and skittered off to go find another hiding place, because that's where they live, is down in the soil. There are many species varying in size from 7/10 of a millimeter, which is teeny tiny, all the way up to 66 millimeters, which is about that long. They're great big. They're either teeny tiny or great big. They thrive in mulched soil that doesn't get disturbed. Again, when you're digging around and disturb them, you're disturbing their nest, their safe place, whatever. They don't like that. They emerge as adults in early summer and are active through the fall before overwintering, and they are typically active at night. So when you're digging in your garden during the day and you disturb one of them, he was probably asleep. Okay, the next one is the rove beetle, which is the picture in the upper right. I've seen these in my garden before, and I just didn't even know what they were. But they're predators in the adult stage and parasites in the larval stage. They're generalists, so will feed on a variety of insect pests as well as beneficial insects. Adults are up to 2 centimeters in length, pretty good size, with a long abdomen that can appear curved up like a scorpion when they are feeding or disturbed. That's the distinctive part that you know it's a rove beetle. They overwinter as adults in protected environments. Their eggs are extremely small, 0.5 millimeter by 0.5 millimeter. They are found under debris and rocks, near water, in compost and piles of decaying material, or in the crop canopy. Now, the rove beetle larva, which is a parasite, that happens because I think the eggs get laid on another bug or another insect of some kind, and then this guy hatches out and eats the other bug. So now the next one I want to talk about, I just love this name, the minute pirate bug. I think that is just the cutest name. And adults have a narrow, pointed head, a flattened, smooth body with distinctive clear markings on their back. They're very tiny, however, 2 to 4 millimeters. Now visualize 2 to 4 millimeters. That's teeny tiny. And the mature nymph is a bit smaller. Nymph is one of the stages that they go through between egg and adult. They overwinter as adults, becoming active early in spring, and there are 3 to 4 generations per year. They feed on aphids, spider mites, thrips, psyllids, whiteflies, and small caterpillars. And then here's the other one that has just such a fun name, the big-eyed bug. I looked and looked and could not find any other common name for this goofy thing than big-eyed bug. Adults and nymphs are oval, somewhat flattened, usually brownish, yellowish, and have a wide head with large, bulging eyes. I think they look like stink bugs, but they're much, much smaller, plus they have those great big eyes. They go through 5 nymphal instars, the stages they go through after hatching. Each instar looks like a smaller version of the adult rather than a larva or pupa like other insects. The eggs are laid singly on leaves of low-growing plants and crops, so the big-eyed bugs generally are just at ground level. Adults and nymphs about 4 millimeters long, so teeny tiny again. They feed on flea beetles, mites, insect eggs, small caterpillars, and other small insects. Okay, the next category is predatory mites. Now, mites technically aren't insects because they have 8 legs. They're arachnids, but they're a predatory bug in your garden, so we're going to talk about them. They're distinguished from their prey by their larger size, pear-shaped body, and translucent coloration. They are very active and fast compared to pest mites. Their eggs are opaque and oval, whereas pest mite eggs are round. You can see that in the picture on the left. The oval orange shape or red shape is the predatory mite. You can see the 8 legs, and that little round orange ball is the mite that it's feeding on, the European red mite egg. And then on the right side, you have a pear-shaped yellow predatory mite feeding on a 2-spotted spider mite. They feed on other tiny plant-feeding pest mites like spider mites, thrips, and fungus gnat larvae. They overwinter as adults, becoming active in the spring, producing several generations per summer, depending on temperature. And the last category we have of predatory bugs, I'm going to say bugs, is spiders. Again, they're not insects because they're 8-legged instead of 6, but they feed almost entirely on insects. And spiders in the garden are your friend. So welcome them and bring them home. Okay, how do I help insect predators in my garden? The first thing you're going to do is you're going to minimize cultivation by using no-till methods to avoid disturbing nests. Many beneficial insects pupate in the surface layer of soil and leaf litter. Many also overwinter there. You're going to use organic, meaning plant-based, mulches to control weeds rather than plastic or landscape fabric, which block insect access to areas for nesting and overwintering. And you're going to provide layers of vegetation, including fallen leaves and dead branches, for nests, shelter, and hunting. And you're not going to use pesticides. They kill indiscriminately, good bugs along with the bad. This includes insecticides, miticides, fungicides, and herbicides. All of these are toxic to insects and should not be used in the garden if you want your ecosystem to be healthy. Okay, next up is the pollinators. Insects that visit flowers to feed on nectar and pollen and are critical to crop production. Many of these are the adult stage of the predatory insects. In this picture, you will see a few critters that you might not have thought about playing a role in pollination. Of course, everyone knows about honeybees, which is the picture on the left with the purple flower. They're the main workhorses of agricultural pollination for almost 400 years in North America after being imported from Europe. You also know that hummingbirds and some bats feed on flower nectar, but have you ever thought about how that also spreads pollen as they move from flower to flower? Now let's talk about the more obvious pollinators, starting with butterflies. Here are just a few of the approximately 70 species native to Vancouver Island. Butterflies prefer flowers in full sun and that are protected from wind. The adults feed on flower nectar during the day, spreading pollen as they move from flower to flower. They also feed on rotten fruit, so don't clean up all the messes in your garden so quickly. You know, a few crab apples or a couple plums that are lying on the ground, the butterflies will appreciate those. Butterfly antennae are simple with a swelling at the end, little bulb things, and their bodies are not hairy, and they generally rest with their wings folded. BC has the largest diversity of butterflies in Canada. Next up are the moths. And here are just a few of the approximately 670 species native to Vancouver Island. Adults feed on flower nectar, just like butterflies, but they do it at night, spreading pollen as they move from flower to flower. Studies show that moths pollinate some flowers that are ignored by bees. And moth antennae range from simple to feather-like, but never have a swelling at the tip like the butterflies do. And their bodies are quite hairy. And they rest with their wings flat, not folded. There are over 2,000 species of moths in BC. One of the things you can do to make life easier for moths is be careful about your outdoor lighting at your house. If you have to have any kind of outdoor lighting, use something that is not full spectrum or that mimics sunlight, because the moths get confused then when the lights are on at night and they think that it's daytime, and they will not be foraging for food because they sleep during the day and forage at night. So you should use yellow lights or something like that at night so that the moths aren't confused. The next category is our wild or native bees. They visit and pollinate the widest range of flowers and crops of any pollinator group. In many cases, they are better at transferring pollen than honeybees. Varieties include bumblebees, sweat bees, mining bees, carpenter bees, and leaf cutter bees, to name a few. Out of over 800 species of native bees in Canada, at least 483 of them are in BC. Most native bees are solitary. A single female provisions a nest. So we have a bunch of the ones that are kind of common here. The sweat bee up in the upper left-hand corner. It's called that because it appears to be attracted to sweat on skin. The leafcutter bee in this bottom corner cuts little circles out of leaves and then folds them up and stuffs them in the hole with their eggs. You can see that the bee there stuffing leaves in the hole. The mining bee is called that because they dig little tunnels in the dirt to lay their eggs and stuff food down in there for them. Small carpenter bees, they will lay their eggs in tunnels and in spaces, in structures and in piles of debris and branches and things like that. Bumblebees are generalists, but they often they will nest in the ground as well, and we have lots of bumblebees around. Now, the blue orchard mason bee in the lower left corner, that one's most people know about, and I'm going to talk more fully about that one now. The blue orchard mason bee is better and more efficient pollinator of native plants than honeybees. It's solitary in nest building, but it will build its nest next to others of their kind. So you may see a whole bunch of mason bees building their nests in one area, even though they don't share the nests. Their active season is early spring. Once they emerge, they mate and then search for empty, natural holes in which to deposit pollen balls and eggs, stacked one on top of another in 5 to 8 individually sealed cells. These eggs will hatch, become pupae, then adults, and overwinter until the next spring. The eggs laid first in this little hole are the females, and then the outer eggs that are laid are always males. This protects the females from predation. And blue orchard mason bees will readily accept the hollow tubes provided by the orchard grower for this purpose, which is kind of why we know more about them. Okay, here's a graphic showing when different native bees are active to help you plan your garden to have flowers blooming for them from April through October. Notice that bumblebees are active pretty much the whole growing season from March through October, but the other bees are active at different times. If this is information that you are interested in saving, I'm going to suggest you take a screenshot of this screen if you know how to do that, because this is a really good visual for making sure you have flowers the whole year for all these different things. Okay, so how do we support pollinators in our garden? The first thing we're going to do is we're going to provide food. And we're going to do that in several ways. We're going to plant flowers in groups to increase pollination efficiency. If a pollinator can visit the same type of flower over and over, it doesn't have to relearn how to enter the flower and can transfer pollen to the same species instead of squandering it on unreceptive flowers. So instead of planting, a flower here and a flower there and a flower there in your garden, plant them in groups. Here's a bunch of daisies, and over here's a bunch of chrysanthemums or whatever, and it'll be more efficient for the bees. Plant with bloom season in mind, providing food from early spring to late fall. So you should have plants in your garden that bloom very early, and then later and later and later, and even plants that bloom in the fall. Plant a diversity of plants, both native and non-native, to support a variety of pollinators. Grow flowers that provide a good landing platform and an open growth habit, making access to the pollen and nectar easier for insects. Think echinacea, bee balm, yarrow, and zinnias. Showy garden flowers with double flower mutations may be inaccessible by insects. Insects evolved when flowers were simple and open, and all of these hybrids that are big double flowers, all of the parts where the pollen and the nectar are embedded down in the petals, and the insects can't find them. Most native beneficials are tiny insects, so plants with tiny flowers will attract them. Things like alyssum and dill and yarrow, they attract a lot more. Oh, and lavender's another one. Caterpillars are the main food for baby songbirds all over North America, so providing host plants that are needed by butterfly larvae during their development will help feed those babies. In fact, songbird populations are crashing all over North America. Partly habitat loss, partly climate change, but a big part of it is loss of caterpillars. They're not finding enough caterpillars to feed their babies, so they can't raise as many babies. The next thing that you can do to support pollinators in your garden is provide shelter. They need protection from severe weather and predators, as well as nesting sites. So you incorporate different canopy layers by planting trees, shrubs, and different size perennial plants in your garden to make different spaces and a lot more spaces for shelter for pollinators. Leave dead plants, leaf litter, and dead snags for nesting sites and shelter. This is one of the hardest things to do. I know as a younger person doing my gardening, we were always taught, clean up in the fall, clean everything up and make it all spick and span and tidy. And what we were doing was clearing away a lot of habitat and nesting spaces and shelter for all these beneficial insects. And sometimes it would be the eggs that had been laid. Sometimes it would be the larvae that were trying to overwinter or the adults, and we were just swooping them away. And we've learned that that's, if you want beneficial insects in your garden, you need to leave some messy stuff, some dead plants, leaf litter, dead snags, etc. And then wait until you see bee activity in the spring before you clear the debris or cultivate the soil, because then you know that if the bees have emerged, the other bugs have probably emerged as well. Another thing you can do is leave tall stalks of dead plants to provide overwintering sites. Like for instance, plants that have hollow stems like echinacea or peony, if you cut them back in the fall to about a foot high, and that leaves that hollow stem, then some insects will overwinter in those, and you leave that stem. You don't cut that down in the spring. You let the new plant, the new growth, grow up and sort of hide and cover those dead stems, because then they may also the bugs that overwintered then may come back and lay eggs in those hollow stems. So you always have a place for overwintering, and you have a place for the eggs to be laid. 70% of native wild bees are solitary and nest underground, so be sure to leave patches of bare ground in your garden. Now, I learned this the hard way. About 5 years ago, I was all excited. I finally got a big load of arborist wood chips to mulch my gardens, and I had enough. I mulched everything, all the garden beds in my whole yard. I was very excited. Next year, and it took me a while to figure this out, but the next year I had very few bees, and I was like, what's up with that? And I finally, after doing some research and reading, figured out the native bees are ground nesters, and I had covered up all the ground. So they had no place to burrow in and build and lay their eggs because the mulch was too deep. So they went to my neighbors and nested and dug their little tunnels and laid their eggs. And if that's where they hatch, they tend to kind of stay there. So I didn't have very many bees. So I from then on, I started leaving a ring of bare soil around the base of all my plants in my yard. Trees, shrubs, everything has a little ring of bare soil for the bees. And 30% of native bees nest in tunnels, beetle holes, hollow twigs, and canes. Bumblebees nest in burrows and cavities, birdhouses, sheds, hollow logs, brush piles, and under tussocks of grass. You can also provide bee boxes for the orchard bees, the mason bees. You can buy those, all different iterations. You can build what looks like a little birdhouse, and you can get little paper straws to put in there that are, you can then, after the eggs have all hatched out, you can take those out and replace them with nice new clean ones. There's lots of different ways to support mason bees in your yard. Just remember, tiny places for tiny critters. That's what you're trying to provide. The other thing you need to do to support pollinators in your garden is provide water. Clean, reliable water is essential. I have a pond in my backyard, so I don't have to worry too much about water, but my front yard is full west, hot afternoon sun, and I always keep a little dish in the shade, in the shady spot in the front yard with water in it, because there's otherwise the bees won't hang around in my front yard because there's no water. Both natural and human-made water features such as running water, pools, ponds, and small containers of water will work just fine. You need to ensure that the water sources have a shallow or sloping side or a stone or gravel put in the middle so that the bees and the other insects can have a safe place to perch. Because if they have to go down too far to get at the water, they will tumble in and drown. So they need to be able to safely get in there. And if you do have small containers sitting around, pots or anything in your yard that you intend for water for insects, be sure and empty it out and refill it periodically, because mosquitoes will lay their eggs in there, and then you'll have a nice crop of mosquitoes, and you don't want that. Okay, the last thing you can do to support pollinators in your garden is learn and use integrated pest management. This is a system for managing pests in your garden without using toxic pesticides. And it starts with prevention and observation before pest control. Remember that pesticides will kill beneficial insects as well as pests, so you should eliminate their use if possible. Pesticides, herbicides, fungicides, they're all pretty indiscriminate killers, so you need to be very, very careful about using them. One other thing you can do is have a look at your neighbor's yard and what kinds of support they are providing for pollinators so you can fill in the gaps. For instance, if you have a pond or a stream, but they don't, but they have lots and lots of flowers, big masses of flowers, then they could provide, they won't need to provide a water source, but you could provide flowers in your yard that they don't have, a different kind of flowers. Let's say they don't have flowers with small that are small. So you could provide then flowers that are small. So think of it as your ecosystem is bigger than just your yard. If you look kind of beyond your yard, you can extend the habitat and the ecosystem for the insects, which is very helpful to them. Okay, next up is a group that are both predators and pollinators. And there are some here that I think you're going to go, what? Those are beneficial. Okay, the first is European paper wasp. Now, I love this bug, and there's a couple reasons. First of all, it's not nearly as aggressive or angry as yellow jackets and hornets. It's a pretty calm kind of guy. He's also kind of pretty. He has orange antenna where yellow jackets do not. And when they fly, their legs kind of dangle down. That's how you can tell the difference. But they're often mistaken for yellow jackets, but they're less aggressive. Their nests are the ones that resemble upside down umbrellas with open cells that can be seen from below. You've seen them. They hang on a little stem and they come out like this, like a little upside down umbrella. They are constructed in protected locations, such as under the eaves of structures, in attics and wall voids, etc. I always have 2 or 3 of those little European paper wasp nests in my garden shed every summer because it's pretty easily accessible by insects. The queens overwinter in protected areas, emerge in the spring, and found new nests. Adults feed on small, soft-bodied insects that feed on plants, like aphids, for instance, and they take them back to the nest to feed to their larvae. They also feed on pollen and nectar, contributing to pollination as they move from flower to flower. They're not as hairy as bees, so they do move less pollen, but between capturing and eating small, soft-bodied insects, the pests, and moving from flower to flower to sip nectar, they act as both pollinators and predators. Now, another one, and this might be a harder sell, is yellow jackets. That's the common name for a predatory social wasp that may be confused with the European paper wasps and hornets, but they are not bees. They're about 1.5 centimeters long with barbed stingers that can sting repeatedly. Their stingers do not detach from the bee's body when they sting. They can keep stinging. Adult diet is fruit, flower nectar, and tree sap, making them important pollinators, although they are not as hairy as bees, so move less pollen. Their larvae feed on proteins derived from insects, meat, and fish that have been collected and processed by the adults. Many of the insects collected for food for the larvae are considered pests, making them beneficial to agriculture. Now, I know that people really hate yellow jackets because in the nice summer evening, you want to sit out on your patio and have a meal. And the first thing you know, the yellow jackets appear and they're foraging on your plate and you're batting at them and they're really bothering you. Well, here's a way to sort of stop them bothering you. And that is about an hour before you're going to sit down to eat. Take a plate with little pieces of the meat or fish or the fruit that you will be having with your dinner and put it someplace about 10 to 15 feet away from where you're going to be eating and give the yellow jackets time to find it. And then they will go back to their other yellow jacket friends and tell them pretty soon they'll all be over there foraging on this decoy plate. that will give you time to go sit out on your patio and have your dinner without being bothered by them. Now, eventually they will find you, but you should have at least enough time to eat your meal without being bothered by the yellow jackets. Okay, the other critter that I know it says here they're both pollinators and predators, but this guy is a pollinator and a parasite, and that's the taconid fly. And there are many species of taconid flies, and this picture is just one of them. And I just like this picture. I thought those big red eyes were kind of cool. What they do is they lay their eggs on the outside of their host, which are usually caterpillars. When the eggs hatch, they bore into the caterpillar, which may die or it may develop into a pupa. A fly, not a moth or butterfly, will emerge from the caterpillar or the pupa. And when they emerge, that caterpillar or pupa is dead because it's been eaten from the inside to feed that egg. This fly, as the adult, feeds on pollen and nectar, contributing to pollination as they move from flower to flower. Okay, so these are pretty valuable beneficials as well. Finally, we have the parasitoids. Parasitoids, I hope I'm saying that right. Parasitoids, there we go. Which are the immature stages of these insects develop on or within its host, eventually killing it before emerging as adults. They may attack all stages of their host, eggs, larvae, nymphs, pupae, and adults. Their parasitic wasps are the main ones that we have where we live, and they occur in various shapes and sizes. The adults are 1 to 2.5 centimeters. The mature larvae are 1 to 2.5 centimeters as well. Life cycles and number of generations per year vary according to the species. They attack aphids, caterpillars, and whiteflies. Now let's look at these pictures. In the upper left corner, we have a braconid wasp parasite with cocoons on a tomato hornworm. Now all those little cocoons are going to hatch and they're going to kill that hornworm. They're going to eat it. At the bottom, this is a whitefly parasitoid. This is a little fly that will lay its eggs on whiteflies. And those whiteflies then will hatch and eat the whiteflies and kill them. The center picture, it shows what happens when a parasitic wasp lays its eggs on an aphid. And then inside the aphid, it hatches, the egg hatches, and it grows and it eats the inside of the aphid. But first, the aphid itself will swell and it will turn into this kind of a dry husk. And when the wasp is an adult, it eats its way, crawls its way out of this aphid mummy. And you can see the aphid mummy in this picture. The picture in the right corner is actually a little parasitic wasp in the actual action of depositing an egg into an aphid. You can see where the arrow's pointing. That's the ovipositor on the parasitic wasp injecting an egg into the aphid. Now, what you need to bear in mind about these pictures is both of these insects are very, very tiny. So this is a real close-up picture. Now, the picture on the bottom right is one that should be familiar to most people in our area, especially gardeners. These are tent caterpillars, and we're all familiar with those. And I suspect you've all seen, noticed, wondered about. Sometimes you see a tent caterpillar with a little white thing on its head, or maybe more than one little white thing on its head. And what those are eggs of a parasitic wasp that have been laid on the outside on the head of the tent caterpillar. And that egg is going to hatch and it's going to burrow into the head of that caterpillar and it's going to eat until it grows into an adult. And it's going to kill that tent caterpillar. Now, I know that when I have tent caterpillar infestation on something in my yard, I will go out with a little dish with soapy water and I'll pluck them off and plop them in the soapy water. But if I find one with this little white thing on its head, I leave it because this caterpillar is a dead caterpillar walking anyway. It's going to die, but it's also, there's going to be a new parasitic wasp that hatches out of there to lay more eggs on more caterpillars. it's the control system for the tent caterpillars. And this is the reason that populations of tent caterpillars sort of rise and then they fall again, because they rise and then right behind them the population of the parasitic wasps rise, and then as the population of the caterpillars starts to fall, the population of the wasps start to fall, so that they rise and fall and rise and fall. It's very cyclical, and that is the wasps doing their work to keep them under control. Okay, in summary, to attract beneficial insects to your garden, provide the adults with food, water, shelter, and nesting spaces. Their larvae, as well as the adults, will reward you by keeping the population of pests in your garden at a manageable and barely noticeable level. The key to creating this balanced ecosystem is to replicate natural spaces and processes as best you can. Your reward will be a thriving, healthy, beautiful garden that is a safe haven for all kinds of critters. One last thing before I end. I want to give a huge thank you to Linda Gilkison for very generously allowing me to use her wonderful photos in my talk. She is a real treasure to those of us in the gardening community in British Columbia, always teaching, always available to answer questions, always willing and ready to share her knowledge and expertise. She's smart, personable, and a great teacher, and we all appreciate her so much. Here are some websites if you're interested in further information. I suggest you take a screenshot of this slide if you are interested in checking these websites out later. The two in particular, the integrated pest management at the top, is really going to help you, if this is not something you know anything about, help you understand this process, how you can garden without pesticides and herbicides and things. And then the Pollinator Partnership of Canada is another really good, thorough website that gives you all kinds of information on how to attract and keep pollinators in your garden. Okay, and that's the end of my talk, and I guess now it's time for questions.
Okay, we don't have any at this point in the Q&A. So if you have any questions or clarifications, comments even, pop them in the Q&A. It's just along the bottom. Our apologies again that the chat is not enabled in this webinar due to our last minute finagling. There aren't any questions.
Okay.
Richard or Joe, do you have any questions? Joe, we can't hear you.
On. There she is. Deborah, have you noticed a lot of or any bat activity in your area?
My daughter lives about 2 kilometers up the road from me in a cleared space in the middle of forest all around, and they have bats in the evening all the time flying around.
Mm-hmm.
I put a bat house up in my backyard about 4 years ago, 5 years ago, with instructions from the Bat Conservancy, bought the bat house from them. I've
Yeah.
not found a bat, and I have a whole green belt with big mature trees behind me. But I know there are bats here. I live in Cumberland, and I just
Mm-hmm.
wish there were more where we are in my yard. I think that'd be awesome.
No, I was just curious because we were out looking at the crescent moon the other night, and something flew across. I thought that's it's got to be a bat, and that was the first one that we've seen here in Duncan. But we're close enough to the Cowichan Valley Trail that I thought there there might be, but I don't know what the bat population here in the Cowichan Valley is. And so I know that you had been involved a bit with the Bat Conservancy, so was wondering whether you knew at all, because they're fabulous for keeping mosquitoes. They eat their weight in mosquitoes at night and moths, and the chickadees eat their weight in mosquitoes during the day. So
And
it's
and the dragonflies eat mosquitoes. I have
oh,
lots of
Tuesday.
dragonflies. Yeah, I have lots of dragonflies in my yard in the summer because we have a retention pond on the other side of our back fence that's still
Right.
water. And I think it's a breeding ground for mosquitoes, but the dragonflies and they're big, beautiful, floating.
Yeah,
I just,
yeah,
yeah,
yeah. They're pretty amazing, you
yeah.
know. But also about the wasps. Um, I have for years kept homemade um, wasp um, well, they're not wasp traps. They're just a paper bag blown up with a black marker about the size of a toonie in one corner. And by putting them on the front of the house and the back of the house, because the wasps are so territorial, they actually will stay away. Um, and I've had them on my fence line, but they won't come near the house because it looks like there's another wasp nest there.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I like you love the yellow jackets and the hornets. I think they're fascinating. And um, if that nest is high, about because we had two in trees that were maybe 7 feet above us, and we coexisted just fine with them. It's just that when the kids were playing as kids, don't knock the tree, don't throw the ball in that direction.
Well,
So they,
they'll only be aggressive if they feel threatened. So
yeah.
yeah, so just stay. Now I do need to tell you about another kind of hornet that I learned about a few years ago. We found a big nest in our katsura tree when it started to drop leaves in the fall that was there all summer. We didn't know because it was in the leaves. Took a picture of the critter coming out of there. It was a giant big thing. It was black and white. Found out it was called a bald-faced hornet.
Oh, yes.
Those
Yeah,
are
and
vicious.
oh, no, they're not. They're not if you stay away from their nest.
I
They,
know. I've been bitten a few times.
Well, anyway, what they do, which I thought you're welcome in my yard, bud, because what they do, they catch and sting and paralyze flies and put flies in the nest with their eggs for the larvae to eat. And if
yeah,
I've got a whole crew out there cleaning up house flies,
yeah,
in the summer, I'm
yeah.
happy for that. And that nest was big. It was great big, and it
They
was,
are big.
and
Yeah,
we didn't even know it was there. And
yeah,
my husband would mow the lawn like 6 feet away, you know,
yep.
and we didn't even know it was there.
And I found the same thing, is that as long as the only a bald hornet nest I ever had to kill was very close to the ground, and I had a neighbor that just had to get into that hedge and snip that hedge, and of course, um, you know, they got pretty upset. So we ended up having to kill the nest, and oh God, that was awful. But I've lived with the both the yellow jackets and two of those big hornet nests, and you leave them alone, and they leave you alone.
Yeah.
You know.
The only thing I see is if they're hidden in a tree or a shrub, then be careful. And that's happened to me twice,
Oh,
where I didn't even know they were there. And the last time, what I did is I just took a look at the nest in the evening and just saw the hornets coming in and out. So then I knew exactly what it was. So I was able to keep away from it. But if you
yeah.
run into it,
Yeah, and I had the same experience with ground wasps, where
right.
I disturbed a ground wasp, and I managed to get into the shed before they did. But after that, I okay, guys, this corner is going to get left fallow, right? It's all yours.
Yeah.
And they were fascinating to watch coming in and out and in and out. And um, they were working the garden the whole season, and they taught me just to stay away from them, and they were just fine.
So
Well,
we do have,
the thing to remember is, they're beneficial.
Yeah,
They're part of the ecosystem and they are providing a service in our gardens. So if you can find a way to coexist with them and not make them feel threatened, they're just fine. Just they're just fine to have around. So, yeah.
You have some questions here from
Yes.
Gail Lester.
Yes, let's start with the mosquito ones. So, Gail had a mistype. Do mosquito dunks? Is that a thing? You know what
Yeah,
it is?
I know what that is. Yeah.
Placed in birds' baths, affect other insects,
Um,
water, etc.
from what I've read about those, and we've actually used them because we have a small pond in our backyard.
Can you
They're
tell us what mosquito dunks
Yeah,
are?
it's a little donut shaped cake of something, and it's not a poison, it's not a pesticide. It's something that stops, I think it might be, I'm not sure what it is, but it doesn't bother anything except it keeps mosquito eggs from maturing. And it just floats in the water, and any mosquito eggs that get laid, they just never mature and hatch. From what I understand, they are non-toxic and safe. I mean, I wouldn't want to take a bite of one, but they're not gonna hurt other critters in your garden.
Other insects was her specific question.
I don't believe so. I think they're just targeted. Well, there aren't very many insects that are going to lay eggs in water, in standing water. That's the thing. In
But you
fact,
would be affecting your other things that predate on mosquitoes.
uh, only by getting rid of the mosquitoes. I mean, if they need mosquitoes to eat, we're not ever going to get rid of all the mosquitoes. But if you have, if like we have a small pond in our yard, and if we haven't had a mosquito problem in it because we have goldfish in it and they eat the eggs. But if there weren't fish, because in the past my husband has used those mosquito dunks in the pond to keep the eggs from hatching. So,
The
yeah.
other thing you can do is if you have dragonfly nymphs in the water, they do eat their
Mm,
weight in mosquitoes.
good. Okay. Good to know.
Moving on, I have a lot of the small red bugs in my watermelons. What do I do?
Uh,
One.
small red bugs in the plants or in the fruit? I'm not sure what you mean by in your.
Maybe Brittany could write more information. That would be helpful.
Yeah. What you could do is take pictures, close-up pictures of these bugs on the plant. And if you could send that into the garden advice line, uh, gardening advice.
Brittany says the soil. Thank you, Brittany.
Oh, they're in the soil. Okay, but if you could get pictures of them, pictures of these small red bugs, and send them to the garden advice line, gardenadvice.milnergardens@shaw.ca.
We'll
Uh,
send it out too.
and we'll do our best to identify them for you, but we'd need pictures.
So there's multiple culprits, is what I'm reading between the lines. To
Okay.
understand.
Yeah, I mean, there are so many bugs in the world, and I am the farthest thing from an expert. But I do know how to do research, so I could maybe figure out what they are if we had good pictures.
That would be great.
Hey.
So Brittany's going to do some great bug photography. Can you type the link I'm driving, please? Brittany, we will send it with the video and the recap from the session, okay? If you Google Milner Gardens, you can find the helpline too, Milner Gardens on the island here.
Or if you go to our Master Gardener's website,
Yes.
vimga.org, vimga.org, you can find a link in there for the garden advice line to send questions in. Yeah, that might be easier.
Actually, Richard, can you type it as an answer to Brittany's thing? Use the type answer button. That would be really great. Thank you. Great. Julie asks, what type of plants do ladybugs lay their eggs on?
Pretty much anything. They just do it on the underside of the leaves. I don't know that they're a particular. See, the thing is, insects lay eggs on a plant that their larvae need to eat when they hatch. So ladybug larvae eat aphids, and there are aphids on everything, pretty much. I mean, lots and lots of plants have aphids. So ladybugs will lay their eggs where there are aphids, is what they will do, because they know that then there'll be food when the eggs hatch.
Okay. Is there anything else that you could do to attract ladybugs? Just to have aphids? Is that the only thing you can do?
They advertise that you can buy ladybugs and release them in your yard. Generally, what happens when you do that is they all fly away. It isn't a very effective way to get them into your garden. Uh, there is some idea that if you release them into something, a container or something small that has water in it so they can drink right away, they might settle down and hang around. But I don't know that there's any proof of that. I think that's anecdotal. If you just,
I spoke with an entomologist about that, and you said that, yeah, because usually the reason they fly away is because they weren't raised in our area.
yeah,
And they just migrate back to where they came from.
yeah,
But if the eggs are laid in this area, they stay in this area. And I did back up your comment about where they lay their eggs. And the Whitney Crenshaw book says, yeah, anywhere there, any plant that hosts aphids will
right.
host ladybugs.
Well, and
So
there's lots of different plants that host aphids,
Yeah,
and there's species of aphids that are very specific to species of plants.
yeah,
Like there's not just aphids that go everywhere. There are aphids for this kind of plant and aphids for that kind of plant, and they're different colors and yeah.
yeah.
But they all will be eaten by ladybug larvae.
all the better to leave habitat for the ladybugs to overwinter in.
Yeah,
Mhm.
Any
Yep.
cracks, any wood that just happens to be piled up against the ground somewhere, or even brambles or bush or whatever.
yeah. A
They
pile
will
of
prevent it.
sticks in
Yeah,
your garden, some half rotted dead logs. Leaf litter is a great place for overwintering. If we can make peace with having our gardens a little messier than we've been taught, they'll be a lot healthier and
Sounds
you'll have a lot
easier
more
to
health.
me.
Yeah, and yeah, everything will be easier, really. If you just, it's when it needs to be spick and span and manicured that it's going to be pretty sterile, I think.
nature isn't clean and
No,
tidy.
no. Well, see, that's the thing. Pretty much everything that you do in gardening, if you can try to replicate nature, you will have more success. When you fight the natural way that plants want to be or that insects want to be, it just doesn't work. It doesn't end up with good results. It's like I teach pruning, and what I teach with pruning is prune a plant so that you're not changing the natural growth habit of the plant. Go with nature. If the plant wants to be like this, don't prune it like this. That's it's just too much work and not good results. So yeah.
Someone is asking about neem oil and horticultural soap. And um,
You can take this one, Joe.
yeah, good. Um, Neem oil is oil. Oil smothers.
Yep.
And as Deborah says, most of your pollinators and most of your beneficial insects are very small, and you're spraying that neem oil. So you're killing everything. Um, the same with horticultural soap. Uh, yes, you may have fungus and whatnot on your roses. So give your roses better environment. Prune them more openly. Don't crowd them. And if you love David Austin roses, well, they're very susceptible. Uh, so don't use this stuff because it's called a pesticide for a reason. And it doesn't matter how good it is, how non-toxic. If it was non-toxic, it wouldn't work. And it, every herbicide is a pesticide, and it kills things. And
And I'd like to add about the insecticidal soap. What it does is it destroys the cuticle on the plant leaves and makes them quite vulnerable to pests and other things. It's marketed as being safe because it's not really a poison per se, but it's hard on the plants. It really is. So yeah.
And I'm surprised that the writer has even talked about neem oil because you can't buy it as a pesticide anymore in Canada.
Oh, yeah. I didn't know that because I haven't
You
tried
can you can get on an American site and order it,
it.
but they no longer sell it because it used to be used for whitefly infestations. And so please don't use it.
Yeah. And believe it or not, lime sulfur oil and what's the other one that's used for fruit trees?
Well, they call it horticultural oil, but
Horticultural
yeah,
oil.
yeah,
They do the same thing. They just smother everything. They
yeah.
kill bad stuff, but they also kill any good stuff that's trying to overwinter on your trees.
It's horticultural oil.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. Um, try to be, in harmony with the natural world and have a tolerance for a few pests in your garden and try to give your plants everything that they need, and they can fight off a lot of pests and make the environment welcoming for beneficials, and they will help you fight the pests. It's a lot less work. You're not spending money on a bunch of chemicals. Yeah.
The other thing you can do when you're planting plants that actually attract beneficials or attract the bad the aphids and stuff. That way they're staying away from your vegetables or the plants that you actually want to keep.
Yep. A good one
Yeah.
for that, if you want to attract the aphids away from like your vegetable garden, is nasturtiums. They
Mhm.
will just get a complete covered with but if you're willing to sacrifice, a nasturtium plant to keep the aphids off of your vegetables, that might be worth a try.
The
The
other
other
thing
thing,
the other
And
yeah,
a
thing
quick thank you to Barbara Samoa. Thank you, Barbara. She says that the mosquito dunks are BT. Okay.
that's what I was
Um,
thinking.
yeah,
Yes,
and they will affect all diptera, not just mosquitoes. So again, you're killing a bunch.
So
yeah.
the other thing you can do is not plant a monoculture in your yard. So you're planting all the same type of plant. Diversify your plants in your yard, and that way you'll ask in more beneficial insects.
And when you plant native plants in your yard, the native beneficials will come and find you because there will be native pests.
Yeah,
And they will all make their nice little ecosystem in your yard. Yeah.
it's all
Now,
about
an
integrated planning.
anonymous attendee has said they need lots of water and fruit. They are smelly and carry viruses that pass to humans. Who does? I mean, that sounds like a neighbor of mine, but
Oh, Joe. Yeah. Yeah. Who is the they they're referring to?
We've
That
all had
yes, yeah,
The great mystery.
yeah. So, well, the reason that I'm interested in the answer is that they carry viruses that pass to humans. Um, mm,
I haven't heard
uh,
of one,
It's from when we talked about
the avian
mosquitoes.
flu or some of the others, but I don't
yeah,
know the
yeah, yeah.
insect. Oh,
Oh, bats.
Oh,
bats, yeah,
bats.
bugs.
Well, dear, I don't know if you've ever talked to a bat, and maybe the bats you know are smelly. I've I've met a couple. As a matter of fact, I had a wonderful little bat who was just this little wonderful guy that ended up getting caught up in the eaves. And where we lived, of course, they migrated. And so luckily I found him or her. I didn't ask, uh, and got it outside before it got too cold. And so it did fly. But it was really neat because I just went out and it scrunched up and I hung it on a tree. It's little, it hung on the tree. And then it was able to fly. And maybe you're talking about the big caves with the lots of bat guano. And that yeah, that does get smelly. And if you've ever been in and around sea lions, that'll gag a maggot. And I'm sure they think we smell too. But bats are extremely important. And there are all different kind of bats.
We can provide them with bat houses that aren't,
Yeah.
you know, that way they wouldn't get into your attic or, you know, where
Yeah.
you don't want them, you know.
Yeah.
Put a
I,
bat house elsewhere in the property somewhere.
I feel the same way about bats that I do kind of about yellow jackets and hornets and things. If you keep your distance and don't bother them, they're not going to bother you. And if you keep
Yeah.
distance, you're not going to smell them. You're not going to catch a virus from them. They're just out doing their thing and they're not going to bother you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
So we have somebody anonymous attendee. Do you talk about centipedes and millipedes?
Centipedes and millipedes, they pretty much only eat decaying plant matter. They're not pests. They look terrible and you think, oh, they must be awful, but they're not. They're nature's cleanup crew is what they are. They clean up decaying things. So
So they'd
they're
be
And
beneficial.
generally anybody that moves fast is a
yes,
hunter.
yes,
And if it's not biting you, it's getting a pest.
right,
Because the pests are generally slow,
right.
right? They're busy sucking on things, chewing on things,
Or
hanging out,
hiding, or hiding.
or hiding,
They're-
you
they're-
know.
Yeah, anything that flies fast or runs is generally a predator, with one exception, and that is the cabbage moth, the little white cabbage moth that lays eggs on your brassicas. It's
Yeah.
the only predator that I know, or the pest that I know, that's awake and fast and busy during the day, flitting
Yeah.
around laying eggs on things. But pretty much the rest of them are hiding during the day, under leaves, in the soil, whatever, and they don't move very fast. It's the predators that are moving fast. Yeah.
Okay,
You have a
so
question,
centipedes and
Judy?
millipedes are great. Leave them alone. Is
They're
that the
fine.
best?
Yeah.
They're
Yep.
not harmful. They're not harmful at all. And they do take care of decaying plant matter and sort of recycle it. You know, they eat it and recycle it. So yeah.
And my chickens think they're delicious.
Yeah, absolutely.
There you go. Someone is asking about buying the mason bees, and yes, you can buy mason bees. They I think the last one I saw was they run about anywhere from $1 to $2 a bee,
Yeah.
and you
Paid
usually
$1 a bee for 20.
but yeah, and except Eric, because then you only get half a bee. But outside of Eric, the half a bee, and only generational people will know that joke. Yes, you can buy them. Once you buy a few bees, and that's the thing about mason bees, is if you have the tubes, they want to nest near where they emerged. So they come in a little box, and you put your tubes up with a bit of a clay or mud in a cup or saucer, and get it a little bit wet, and they will emerge, and the guys emerge first, and they hang out, you know, like strut around, and hey ladies, and then the girls come out, and then you avert your eyes, and then the guys have done their thing, and then
The free for all.
the girls get to work, and they will use the tubes that are nearby. There will be anywhere from 6 to 10 cocoons in a tube. Those tubes are about 6 inches long. That's the length that they like. And so that those bees that you bought multiply a lot, and you take the tubes out. You can just overwinter the tube if you like. I won't get into the weeds on this, because you can read a lot on different sites about caring for your mason bees, but you really should only have to buy your bees once, because them and their children, their grandchildren, and my God, I have so many mason bees this year. I'm going to be giving them away to my neighbors. I probably already have 24 filled tubes, and
I'd like to be first on your list, please.
you've got them. I'll send you 10. I'll bring next time. Well,
Send me an air post.
yeah, at the AGM, I'll bring you a dozen tubes.
Yeah, you,
Thanks.
you do need to remember you can only buy mason bee cocoons or whatever
Yeah.
Cocoons.
in late
Yeah.
winter. Like right now it's too late.
Yeah.
Yes.
And bees are pretty much
Did you say late
Yeah.
winter, Deborah?
Yep.
Winter.
Yeah, it just flipped.
because they hatch. They're one of the first things that hatches out in very early spring,
Yeah.
and
The
they
only thing you
only live for a couple months. So
The only thing you have to be careful with is they do have mites. So that's, I would strongly recommend, if you're going to keep mason bees over the winter, that you actually do your due diligence and find out about the mason bees and find out about their care. Because if you just allow them to hatch on their own without actually doing something with them, like cleaning them or whatever, you will end up with a whole bunch of mites, and your result will be a lot less bees.
yeah, agreed.
And here's something too. I was just working on an article on it. Wendy Young asks, what changes in pollinators do we anticipate with a changing climate? And I'm going to quote you something here out of the Canadian press. 1/5 of the pollinators in North America face extinction right now. And you mentioned Dr. Gilkison, a wonderful gal, earlier, Deborah, and she said something that really caught me. She says, "How's your windscreen?" She said, "Have you noticed? You know, there's not a lot on your windscreens."
Yeah.
I thought, she's right. Right? That it's not covered the way it used to be covered. Yeah.
Those of us of a certain age remember driving in the car.
Yeah.
And the windshield was always covered, and the grill was just covered with dead bugs.
Exactly. Yeah.
There were so many insects. Actually, Linda Gilkison does a really interesting presentation called "Where Have All the Insects Gone?" That if you ever get a chance to watch that, you really should. It is scary and fascinating about the collapse of insect populations all over the planet. And if the insects disappeared, 80% of the life on this planet would disappear within short order.
Oh, yes. And even our the pollinators that are direct pollinators that Deborah was talking about. I'm reading a statistic here from the same piece. Pollinators provide more than $15 billion worth of food in North America every year. Yeah. So no pollinators, no food, no people. So although that's scary, by doing all the things that Deborah has talked about, you can slow things down, and you can save populations that are collapsing. We have proved that with the eagles, whose population was collapsing. The cod fishery is coming back in the Maritimes. There are populations like that with insects. Many of the cities and towns and districts are providing green corridors, not only for migratory animals, but for the insects that are migrating. I mean, look at all the things that people are doing now to save the monarch butterfly. Mm-hmm. And it just is, you can't change the world. You can only change your own garden, and you can only encourage your neighbor to change theirs.
Stop cleaning your garden up so much.
We have a
Yeah.
question from Clara Fitzgerald about what's a good way to stop snails eating seedlings. Um,
Put them
to manage
somewhere
this
that
earth.
snails can't get. Are you talking seedlings in the ground?
Yeah, I think that's what she's talking about.
Put
Would
a barrier. Well, how would you do that? I rarely.
diatomaceous earth around it.
Yep, that would do it. Yeah,
Uh,
diatomaceous earth,
copper, copper,
ring, copper mesh
copper
around
mesh. Yeah.
a ring. Yeah.
Or what else could you do?
Well,
Well,
you know, I'm a big proponent of wine
oh,
because with a glass of wine in one hand and a little pail around my wrist, I can go out picking snails. And a glass of wine will do about 10 snails.
So
I don't. I,
I can just see you out there with a glass of wine, a headlight on your head,
yeah.
because
Oh yeah.
they're only out during the night.
Oh yeah.
No
Oh yeah.
Netflix
I,
for you, right, Joe?
oh hey,
Snail killing.
if you're going to be considered the weird neighbor that doesn't have a green lawn, go for it. Just go for it. I had the where we used to live, we had lovely neighbors, and they were Japanese, and their mother loved rhododendrons. And so one night I kind of wake up because I hear this funny sound, and I hear this, hi, what? And there she is out there with her chopsticks, and she is getting those rhododendron beetles at night, right? Plunk into the bucket. And I thought, that's one smart woman. And so that's how I got rid of my rhododendron bugs. And that's how I learned to drink wine with snails.
Okay, we have a question from Brittany Thomas. Any advice on growing beets?
beets.
Yes.
Uh,
Beet.
beets like soil that's a bit more alkaline than our acid soils, so you
Yeah.
need to lime. And my experience, they're kind of heavy feeders. They need
Yeah.
fertilizer. Um, I think, and any root vegetable, the soil needs to be sort of loose and humusy, if you will. If it's soil that's really hard and packed, that they just won't do well. But I think fixing the pH of the soil is going to be a big help.
Okay, we
Mhm.
have a question about vegetable plot has lots of tiny ants. Should I be worried? Probably not. If they're the little ants, the little sugar ants, they're actually doing your garden
Mhm.
great service, actually, because they're aerating the soil. They're actually building all kinds of little tunnels through it, which adds air, it adds moisture and everything else. So, no, I wouldn't worry about it. But if they're the bigger ants, then I would be.
What you'll find though, if they are the larger ants, which are usually the carpenter ants, the dark body, sometimes a red head, is that they're traveling through your garden. They're not nesting in your garden. Their nest is big, and probably 2, 3 feet across and maybe a foot high. And if you see quite a few of them, look around your house because they have multiple queens, and they have baby nests. So they will raise their babies in a little warmer, little more humid environment, and that's our houses. So the little guys, they're just a pain in the patoot.
So
But
just keep,
the carpenter ants actually are probably not living in your garden.
no, they're living in your house. So just
They're living in your house, and they're going back and forth to their woodland big nest.
So we
Yeah.
have a question from Jennifer. Should I worry about pill bugs, wood bugs, a problem? No.
So,
They are the recyclers of
right.
the garden.
They're one of the ones that I talked about that are neutral, that aren't necessarily beneficial to people, but they're not a pest either. And they're not going to bother any of your plants. They just eat dead stuff, decaying plant matter, like the centipedes and the millipedes. So not a problem.
Sometimes you will find them nibbling around the stalks of your vegetables. Um, And that's probably because you have the mulch up against the stalk of the vegetable. So pull the mulch away so you have a bit of bare ground. And they're not gonna get into that. They're composters.
Yeah, they're not going to eat your green living stuff.
Deborah, can I ask you one hopefully short final question?
Sure.
Okay, so for us veggie gardeners and this whole not cleaning up thing, what does that look like at the end of the season? Do we not pull out our plants, even if they're not overwintering? Like, what would you suggest?
I never pull any of them out because if I leave the roots in, they will decompose and feed the soil. So if it's something that has disease on it or isn't going to provide hollow stems or any kind of habitat, I will cut it off. I will do the chop and drop, cut it, kind of chop it up, just leave it lay right on the soil. For one thing, I like all my garden soil to be covered with something over the winter to protect it from the pounding winter rains. And the chopped up plants are great for that. Straw is great for that. Grass clippings, anything, leaves are all great for that. And it's all good habitat for beneficials as well. Now, anything that's diseased, though, you don't want to leave it on there. You want to put that out with your municipal.
Into the compost.
Especially brassicas, because you get clubroot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you just chop it, put it in your compost. A lot of people are worried because, oh, it's diseased. Put it in your compost. It doesn't survive the compost. If the compost is hot enough to decompose things, it denatures any of the diseases and whatnot that you'll find in your vegetable garden.
The other thing, in the RDN, they've allowed us to start putting in vegetable cuttings, garden cuttings into our recycling.
We can put anything in ours, so yeah.
So it's always a good idea. If you're anywhere in doubt, then put it in your recycling bin.
Yeah. And in the Cowichan Valley, they do the same. As long as it's chopped into small pieces, so it's easy for the truck and whatnot. Then they'll take that.
Contact the municipality where you live and ask them how, what they will take and how it needs to be handled.
So follow-up question, Deborah. So I've done the chop and drop and the spring comes along. It's, coming up to that May long weekend, that magic May long weekend. What do I do for my planting season?
Push it aside.
Just push it aside and put it in?
Plant it in. Yeah, because eventually it will just decompose and disappear.
And it'll help keep the soil moist.
That's right.
Moderate
And
soil
it saves so much time.
Yeah.
Isn't that? See, you're supposed
Better?
to. Yeah.
This whole nonsense of cleaning everything up. We just
They
need
like. Yeah, they lied to you, honey.
I
You
might
don't
have to get you to
suffer.
come and reprogram my partner. I'll ask you about your hourly wage after this session.
Okay.
Okay, just something to look forward to. On June 2nd, Peter McCulloch will be doing a presentation on annual borders and hanging baskets. And Peter is just a newly
Minted.
newly minted Master Gardener. So we're quite looking forward to his presentation.
And he's a lovely man too. It's going to be a great presentation. Yeah.
Great.
Did we miss any questions?
No, we answered 27 things.
Excellent.
Including comments.
Excellent.
Wow.
Somebody got your Monty Python.
Yeah, I see they got their references. Somebody else is old.
Only one or two people on the island. So thank you so much for being here. We apologize for the link mix up with our big change of plans. We will be posting the recording soon. We appreciate your time as well as the Master Gardeners. We've got some links we'll put in the Milner Garden helpline, and I found that Linda Gilkinson insect thing, so we'll send that out too. And we keep all of these on YouTube and on our website for forever so far. So there's
Actually,
great sessions.
if you would put just Linda Gilkison's website, it's just lindagilkison.ca, I believe.
Okay.
She has a ton of great stuff on her website.
She
she
lives on Salt Spring, correct?
she does, and she is just amazing. And we don't want her to ever die or retire. She just
Yeah, we've told her she's not allowed
No
to.
not
pressure,
allowed.
Linda.
And
She's absolutely wonderful. So
stay tuned for the new Vimga website. There'll be a lot more information available to the gardeners,
yep, we're
and a
revamping this.
lot more links to articles, to information that we have shared in the past and present. So